Right, Saxo fans, hopefully you've watched episode 36. This is literally going to carry on straight where we left off. I've just uploaded that video, so I'm just going to go straight into it and we're going to carry on adjusting all the ring gaps. We'll get all the pistons and everything built and we'll get them put in. That's probably the first few minutes of what we're going to do. So, cue the time lapse for ring gap adjustments. Right, there we go then. So ring gap's all done. Now then, on to pistons. So I need to go and break these. Just need to go and use the vise in the other garage. So I'll take the rods out and break these. These are all numbered now, so I know which cap will go where. Pistons I've now numbered as well, and obviously all the piston rings are numbered. I've already put one circlip in each piston, ready to accept the gudgeon pin. We'll stick the bearings in. I'm going to put the piston rings on at the very end. It'll be the last thing I do, just because I really don't want to break one by just being careless. So we'll basically get it all done, piston rings on, and then we'll fit them in. So snip to the other garage and we'll get these broken in half. Right, next up then, so bearings are in. Let's get these slotted into the pistons. So a little pot here. I've got some brand new clean engine oil. So I'm just going to give it a little dunk. Over. That's that one done. Right, so I'll put the circlip in a sec, but that's nice, feels good to me. So I'll do the other ones and then we'll put the circlips in. Right, next up is the circlips. Now this bit can be quite fiddly. Now everybody's got their own way of doing this, I suppose. But I tend to use just like a really thin, small, flat edge screwdriver, and I'm sure there's some people out there screaming. And what I tend to do with these is get them in as far as I possibly can with my fingers, and it doesn't always work first time. And then I'll just lever it up into position, being obviously as careful as possible not to mark the piston in any way. There we go, that one's in. I've done that one already, so we'll just do those two and they're ready to go. Right, let's do the other one. Right, time to pop the piston rings onto the pistons themselves. Now I've got the installation guidelines from Woosner, and it tells you which is the top ring, which is the second ring, So the top ring essentially has some writing on it, or sometimes you get a little circle mark, which essentially donates up. Same with the second ring, and if you don't have writing, then these second rings are actually tapered, albeit it's so difficult to see because they're very, very small. But thankfully mine have both got writing on, so I'm just going to obviously put those facing up. So nice and easy. I've already done the first one. Obviously I always do one off camera to make sure I don't bodge it. But yeah, that one's all done, we're ready to go. So I'll do the same now for these three. Right, rings are all fitted. I did just do a sanity check at the very end, and I had fitted number 3 here, top ring upside down, so obviously corrected that. So always go back and have a quick another look. I remember building this sort of stuff, you know, back in the heydays, and we used to have some amazing tools for putting these things together, obviously way more than what I've got in the garage. And you can do these by hand, obviously, there's no issue with that. You just have to be very careful you don't scratch the side of the boards when you're putting them in. We used to have a clamp tool. You put the piston ring in it, clamp it together, and it would open it, and you could slot it over and let it go. Brilliant tool, really good. And also, yeah, for putting pistons in, I'm going to be using one of these sort of clampable sleeves. But we used to have like a tapered, machined cylinder. Essentially, put it on top, just push the piston all the way through. Dead easy. No, you don't have to bother any of this clamping nonsense. But you know, I haven't got one of those machine things, and it's not worth having one made up just to put 4 pistons in. So I will endeavour with one of these. Lots of lubrication, I think, is probably going to be the key, and slow and steady. I think obviously I'm going to have to give it a punch to go through. But yeah, you know, it might not work first time. Obviously, it's been a while, so I don't want to break anything. So I'm just going to go steady. But first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put some stuff on the floor to make sure any oil that obviously I'm going to put in doesn't drip. And then obviously we can get one of these in here and give it a go. So let's do it. Right, very nearly got carried away there. We put the bearing cap on before I was ready. But we are going to plastic gauge the big ends. So I'm going to try this time to remember to film it, which I forgot in the last episode. So let's dig out some of this. Make sure I've got the right one. So do one at a time. We could generally do 2 at a time, but I think as this is the first one, we'll just do one. So I'll put the cap on now. Now I've put a mark on all of the caps, so they will go back on the way they came. There's no oil in any of these bearings. What I did do is oil the main, the journal itself and the crank, and then wipe off as much as I could, just because I don't want anything on there that shouldn't be. So we'll run that down. Tell you what I have forgotten. That's the ARP bolt loop. So we'll put some of that on. We'll get it in there now. Right, I've actually put some lube on the bolts now. You get this stuff actually in the box with the con rods and the bolts. I didn't see it, so I bought myself a tube. Totally didn't need to. There you go, I've got enough now to do about 30 engines. Anyway, so that's that. We'll run these down now then. Right, spec of these is 55 Newton meters. If you've used the bolts before, you need to have checked for stretch. So, just give me a moment, set this. There we go. Right. Right, that's torqued, so I don't want to turn it now, despite the urge. So what I will do is undo those, back them off, and we'll see what the plastic gauge looks like. Right, actually remember to film the plastic gauge section this time, so hopefully you can just see. In fact, let me zoom in for you. Let me just drop you down a second. There you go, that's a slightly better view. Right, so plastic gauge on there. I've got the millimeter spec gauge here, piece of cardboard. So we needed it to be between those three top marks. So I would say we're probably under that one, but obviously not as wide as there. So we're somewhere in between on that, which is good. We needed to be at no more than 0.05, and obviously we are under that. Yeah, by a good margin as well, I'd say, sort of 2 or 3 mil either side of the, sorry, one side of this. So yeah, definitely between 0.03 and 0.05. So happy with that one. So I'll clean this off, bring the piston back up to the crank. We'll oil it properly, and then I'll go and do the rest. And then hopefully that'll be the worst of the, you know, sort of the tricky bits of the bottom end done, really. Yeah, good. Okay, so that's all the bottom end done. Everything's torqued, I did plastic gauge all of them, obviously I only showed you the one of them, but we're all happy, we're all in spec, all around the 0.038 range, so I'm quite pleased with that. One thing that we used to measure back in the day when building engines was torque to turn. We used to have a fancy digital torque gauge that would give you a live reading and record a peak for you. I don't have one of those. So what I've got is I've set my torque wrench to, say, 10 Newton meters. And if it clicks over, obviously, that's the torque. So it's not taking 10 Newton meters to turn that. Let's turn it down a bit to 8. Okay, I'm just, yeah, so 8 Newton meters to turn that over. Let's just go somewhere in between. Let's go 9. Yeah, so 8 Newton meters to turn it over. That's not clicking the torque wrench at 9 Newton meters, but it did at 8. Which I think is pretty good. You know, I can sort of move it with my hand. So I'm fairly happy with that. You know, there's no binding or tightness in there. So anyway, job's a good one. That is now done. Right, next up then is to get the sump baffled plate in place. And that obviously just sits on there, and I've got 4 small bolts to pop in, which I'll lock tight in. And I need to get that in first, because then the oil pump with the sprocket that I've just popped in over here essentially slides over and the pickup sits in here. Also need to fit these little flaps, and I think they go that way essentially to stop any oil escaping away from the pickup. It will obviously let oil come back through. So I think I might need to soften these up in a bit of hot water, because they are notoriously stiff. I remember doing these years ago and they're a right pain in the ass. So I'm going to get these in, bolt that down, and then put the oil pump and everything on. Right, next up is oil pump. So obviously I've given this a good clean. This slots onto there. And I've got a brand new chain. And I think from memory I kind of have to slide them on both together. Right then, Saxo fans, so bottom end is basically done, 90% of the way there. There's a few bits left to do still, but I've intentionally left them off just because I know my life's going to be a bit easier when it comes to bolting things on, like the manifold and obviously the alternator and things like that are not in the way. So we'll get to that, and obviously they're dead easy to bolt on, so it's nice and simple. Next episode then, I want to get the cylinder head on. I'm going to have to get back a step because there's a little bit of a problem with that, which I'll talk about next time. I'm going to make a couple of changes while we're there, might as well. So yeah, but in the next episode, obviously top end rebuild, and we can start bolting on some of the blingy bits like we've already seen before, I guess. You know, obviously get the manifold on, turbo on, things like, you know, when you start bolting on your blingy bits, then obviously it starts to feel a bit more real. So we'll do all of that hopefully in the next episode. My aim really is to get the engine and the gearbox, obviously clutch and flywheel, all that bolted on, all done, and sat on the floor essentially waiting, ready to go and fit into the car. There's a few bits I need to do with the car before we do that. Obviously, as I said in my last episode when I brought the car in, it has suffered a little bit in a couple of places, so I'm going to take the time to get all that right before we put the engine in. Which means obviously my progress is probably glacial compared to what you're expecting, but obviously I want it right. Anyway, going to leave it there for this episode. Thanks for watching as always. The comments that I get, always really positive, so thank you for those. And yeah, I'll probably see you maybe in about 10 days for the next one. So see you then.